Okay, let me preface this by saying I don't have students right now, so it'd be really difficult to stretch this into 15 minutes unless you just want to hear me talk for 15 minutes. Um, what I will do, though, is go over how I would present this to my students and what we would do in order to gain better understanding and to show that understanding throughout the class, and some activities that we would do that would further bolster that understanding and also build some self-respect and some respect between the students. The last school I worked at, there was a lot of difficulty with that. As a junior high, of course, there's always that difficulty, but it was enhanced by several different factors, not the least of which would be socioeconomic. But in this case, what I want to discuss is how agriculture was first introduced into mankind's history and what it really did for the growth of our civilizations and how it impacted us historically. Uh, the first thing I would want to do is ask my students if they're familiar with Goldilocks. So I mean, it would go something like this: Hey, who knows who Goldilocks is? And of course, someone's going to know. Someone's going to know that Goldilocks is the little blonde-haired child that walked into the bear's home, and this porridge was too hot, this was too cold, this was just right. So when we consider this, when we consider what Goldilocks is, and we understand that just right phrasing there, then we understand what it takes for agriculture to exist, what it takes for mankind to exist, not the least of which. But we have to have just right conditions. And those conditions presented themselves in Mesopotamia. And we have already discussed by this point where Mesopotamia is. But we also realize that it's the Fertile Crescent, and I would show that on a map so that the students could understand about where we're talking about between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. And we would understand there would be some discussion then of what a river valley is to man. How did that present those Goldilocks conditions? You know, we had the proper climate. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. It wasn't too wet or too dry. We also had a water source there, readily available water source. And then we could discuss then what mankind does. And let me go step back for a second. We're talking about this to a secondary group, maybe 10th, 11th grade, high school. It would be brought down quite a bit for a junior high crowd, and it would take probably a bit longer to describe this. But as we're talking about Goldilocks conditions, mankind is the only species on this earth that has the ability to create Goldilocks conditions. And he can do this, say in the Mesopotamia river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates. If it's too dry, if we have a drought, well, guess what? We can irrigate. So man's technology, man's ability to adapt to a situation allows us to create Goldilocks conditions. And this is not a new theory. This is one that's been around for quite a while. And I would supplement this through the use of a program that I found. It's free to most to all social studies teachers, and it follows pretty closely along with standards. Now, I know they do in Louisiana. I'm pretty sure because their Common Core standards are going to be pretty similar in Arkansas. And this big history project, it has leveled reading. It has videos, little short videos that capture the attention and you can discuss from there. It offers discussion questions. And it's a way for students to truly interact with social studies instead of just of a sit and get. It offers that instructor, that educator, the opportunity to really involve students and make social studies more of a reality instead of an abstract thought. Then we can bring it more into reality, and that's important. It's important to understand that history and social studies, anthropology, psychology, all of those things fit hand in hand, and they impact what happens today. And as we discuss this Goldilocks, there's some leveled reading there, as I mentioned. We're going to take the time. I'm going to have students come up and we're going to read this. We're going to read it. We're going to discuss it. And I'm not going to pick my best students to come up and read. I'm going to pick weaker students to come up and read and stronger students. and we're all going to help each other. That's where we build that respect. I will do that through the use of classroom management and just through the idea of being repetitious. Everybody knows they're going to come up here and do this. So if you know you're going to come up and do this and you might make a mistake, then you're less apt to sit there and giggle or laugh or be derisive towards someone who is not as strong a reader, because we all realize that within a classroom setting, you have different levels of reading. That's why I like this program, because it does have leveled reading. But as we discussed the Goldilocks concept, I would have already gone through a good bit of this, because we would start off with some talking about the Big Bang, talking about discussing how we had to have Goldilocks conditions for Earth to even exist. It had to be a certain situation. And so they would be more familiar with this, but for the sake of this, I went ahead and described what the Goldilocks conditions are. And then we discussed how agriculture began to impact humanity. And we can talk about then that as we gained the skills to grow enough food to support a larger population, then we started having these benefits. But we also have detriments. And we have a graphic organizer that I use for that. And it's one where we will start to list, as a class and as a group, small groups at times, the different problems and the different benefits of these, and do some comparison and contrast. And today we could do a little comparison and contrast. And for that situation, we would bust apart into small groups, simply because they don't know that much yet. And we would take the text we have, we would take what we've learned in class, and also a couple of short videos, and they could use that then for their evidence. And I prefer to use the RACE strategy. Repeat, answer all parts of the question, cite your evidence, and explain your answer. And these are important because it helps these students to focus their writing abilities, helps them to focus their thoughts, and so that they can get them down on paper. And of course, I would move across and through the classroom. We would come up upon problems, and I promise you, we would come upon problems where we could then, I could stop and say, okay, well, what do you think? It's not a matter of me just giving you an answer. I don't want that. That doesn't, I know what I'm talking about. I want to know that they know what they're talking about. And if they can start giving me those cogent answers, those answers that show that understanding, if they can't, then we need to revisit it. I need to stop, need to focus their attention back on me for a moment, and try to pull them all together so that we can all be on the same page going forward. If not on the same page, at least in the same chapter. That's important because I don't want anyone falling behind. And you fall behind is very difficult in social studies to catch back up because everything we do is built upon previous generations for the subsequent generations. And it's vital that they understand this. So once we understand this basic concept of Goldilocks, and we're going into the problems and the benefits, then we can start seeing how each impacts. I could ask one of the groups, okay, listen, here's what you do. You describe to me in a couple of sentences. Stuff's going blurry here for some reason. Describe to me how an overabundance of food is a benefit. Then I can go to the next group and say, based upon what we've read, describe to me how an overabundance of food is detrimental to a civilization. And of course, we're looking for answers like, well, with an overabundance of food, then you can pay for these skilled artisans. You can pay for craftspeople. You can build these big projects like the Egyptians later do. The Mesopotamians did it as well with the ziggurats. Ziggurats were huge temple complexes. And we could then go off into what a ziggurat is, and that would eventually happen. Then we ask about detriments. And we've already covered this. We've covered it briefly. They might say something like, it started attracting rodents, vermin, and that started spreading disease. And that's something that we could point out. Another thing that they could point out was with an overabundance, if you're the have and there's have nots, what are they going to do? And that's another discussion that could branch off from there. And these are things that I would want open discussion on. And in this format, and I know from experience that this format will work. If I put them into small groups and I give them this to work on, then their little brains, or large brains, whatever they may have, are going to be working. They're going to be digging for that information. They're going to be looking for it. And from there, they can take off and go. And then you start to have that foundational knowledge. And with the foundational knowledge that you have, then I can build upon that. And this is one of those key points in world civilization that you have to get across. Because without agriculture, there is no civilization. Without the ability to feed us, there's no civilization. So that's something I need to impart upon to them. And this is a fairly effective means of getting it. I don't think everything needs to be put onto a formal test and let's test you on it. Now, we'll pull some test questions from there. I certainly will. But I think it's more important at this stage to understand it rather than repeat it. And understanding to me comes out better either with you telling me or with you giving me a short summary of it, because you have to actually think then. It's not a matter of going, hey, C looks like the right answer. No, you have to come up with the answer. And if I ask you to write me a sentence or two sentences to briefly describe the problems and the benefits of these things, it tends to show better understanding. And that's the point. And a lot of this is going to be done through classroom management. You come in, there's a routine. They know on the board there's going to be something that would say, what's the Goldilocks conditions? We've already discussed it previously. So they can come in and go, hey, I know what that is. Or they may have forgot. So we'll go back over it. When I ask at the end of the 5 minutes for the bell ringer, then we can move right on into the lesson and students can start responding. And that is my hook. That's how I'm going to get them in there, and let's start pulling them in, and get them engaged. Don't believe a lot in worksheets. I don't believe worksheets build dendrites. We will use some. There will be some academic vocabulary because some of it they'll need to know. They'll need to know what a ziggurat is. They'll need to know what irrigation is. Those are some of the words I'll give them. We can talk about detriment and problems. Those are words they may not know. So if I give you those answers, those words, I should say, and we define them together, then you begin to build a better understanding, of the student will. And I'll begin to see that because they'll start incorporating those into their writing. They'll incorporate that into their verbiage. So that helps us all. Makes my job easier if they have a basic knowledge. And this being about a 15-minute segment, it would be basically question and answers for 15 minutes. After that, we would move into the small group for about another 20 minutes. Then we're going to discuss the vocabulary, and then, of course, we're going to wrap up the class. And there's an established procedure for this, of course. We would simply follow that established procedure. We do that in the first couple of weeks of school. We practice these, and then we continue to practice them. There'll be times when the students will fall out of habit, and we'll have to fix that. But since I had no students, this was the format that I chose. This is the direction that I would take this for that little bit of 15 minutes, and would really want to impress upon them the importance of this, and also with the videos and the stories and the classroom discussions, it tends to bring about that engagement that we all seek. Engagement, of course, makes our job so much easier when they're actively involved in learning. Thank you.